Standing up in McKinney, this is, according to Callus, episode 736. Coming to you on the 7th of April, the year of our Lord, 2025. And today we're going to talk about It's a Conspiracy. Keeping in mind this is only maybe half tongue-in-cheek, but that's the topic for today, right? What goes on and what do you see and what do you know? All right, before we get into that, let me remind you that even though the podcast is going to change in more ways than one in the near future, it doesn't mean we're going away. It doesn't mean that there isn't a purpose to still like, sharing, subscribing to this here podcast. And join me, right? Everything that we do and we work on together makes a difference. Like, share, subscribe. Follow me on the podcatcher of your choice. You know, I'm on all the big ones, including some of the little ones. Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, the Amazon, the Audible, Apple iTunes, and Google Play. And you can still find me over at YouTube. And, well, you know, on the social media side, I have a page and a group over at Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe, and there is a X site. All right. Before I get too excited, let's jump right in here. Okay. So I suppose if you go and look up the definition of a conspiracy, it'll tell you something along the lines of when two or more people get together and they go to work together to an end, a specific end. You can have a criminal conspiracy, i.e. where they're working towards criminal things. You can also have other benign conspiracies, right? What I want you to consider for just a moment is I have friends that are, shall we say, to the right of me, and some that aren't even to the right to me, that consider much of what's going on to be part of a larger conspiracy. I will tell you there are folks definitely to the left of me that see the world in a similar way. I've always looked at things from the standpoint that very few things that we see and hear are actually as they seem. There's usually something else going on. There's either an underlying motive or something else that is also under consideration, right? Things are never cut and dry, clear and simple. Now, before I go any further, let me be absolutely clear. I don't know what I don't know, and I don't think we can always be certain of what we think we know. So I reserve the right to get this wrong. I reserve the right to misunderstand. I reserve the right to, quite frankly, upset somebody. And I say that because anytime you talk about conspiracy, anything, inevitably it circles around a specific group of people. And you already know, so I'm not going to say it. I will say this. It's never been lost on me that there could be other motivations behind outing certain conspiracies, real or imagined, that could in fact be their own conspiracy. It's also never been lost on me that when you combine the idea that people tend to have a vested interest in people like them being successful, right? Their in-group preference, and there is a preponderance of names that reappear. It just indicates there could be something there. It's not necessarily assuming guilt. It's not necessarily assuming criminal conspiracy. It's not even necessarily indicting a group of people from a background or derived from a certain background. It's just is. So setting that aside, right? Because look, I'm not wanting to spend an enormous amount of time on some worldwide grand conspiracy thing, which is when that stuff generally gets brought up. We're just going to set that aside. We're going to say that's very interesting fodder. Whether it's true or not is way beyond my pay grade. Don't care. What we're going to focus in on is the things that are much closer to home, right? So when we look at what's going on in the Texas House, for instance, it's very clear there is a conspiracy by a group of people to ensure that certain things happen and certain things don't. Now, is that conspiracy benign? Well, I guess that depends on where you sit, right? And what you see. There's certain historical things that have happened both here in Texas and in the nation as a whole that raise eyebrows. How did that happen? What happened? Why did it happen? Yeah, that's probably conspiracy. As to what the motivations were, well, that remains to be seen. I stumbled across a YouTube video yesterday, which I guess in part motivated some of what I'm getting at here. The guy was talking about a book called The Power Broker, about the guy that essentially was responsible for developing New York. And he was simultaneously referred to as the man responsible for building New York, but then was referred to as the most racist individual you'd ever known. But what's also interesting is he was a German Jew. Let that sink in for just a bit. I mean, take away from that's somebody else's accusation, not mine. I just putting it there for the idea that things are happening that don't seem to make sense, and there's people seeking to manipulate events outside of the sphere. That's what I want to get into. So the easiest, lowest hanging fruit for those of you that might be listening to me right now, there was an election that happened in my home state of Wisconsin, or former home state, if you will. It was an election between, we'll just say, a left of center person running to be on the Supreme Court and a right of center person to be on the Supreme Court. Now, there is evidence of, and I'll just say unproven, uncorroborated evidence suggesting that the elections administrator or the county officials responsible for that in Dane County and Milwaukee County, working with the state office to make sure they had enough votes to ensure that their preferred candidate won. Okay, so that's item number one. That's kind of a problem, but no. That's an enormous problem. But again, there is no direct corroborating evidence. So at this point, we're just going to say it's an observed possibility that there was no good. And a whole lot of people in my current state, right, Texas, the promised land, were congratulating Wisconsin for electing a left of center judge to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So I'm kind of curious as to why that is. See, they were all upset that Elon Musk was incentivizing Republican voters to get out and allegedly was giving them money. I think it was some kind of lottery for those that voted. And I don't know and I don't care. But they were saying we defeated the evil billionaire. All the while they failed to realize that there was yet another ostensible evil billionaire manipulating events from left of center. Yeah, the guy's name is George Soros, and yes, I know, a European Jew. Yeah. Okay. But he's also a known Nazi collaborator. So go figure that one out. Right? So again, setting that aside, one side is excited that we defeated an evil billionaire, and the other side is saying, yes, but your person is supported by yet another evil billionaire, both of which are foreigners, by the way. But that seems to be lost. And so you've got people in Texas excited that a billionaire manipulated an election in another state. And then another billionaire got involved in the same said election and tried to manipulate it the other way. Yet the outcome was foretold based upon the election administrators in 2 counties in Wisconsin, as it usually is, i.e. the seat of Madison and the seat of Milwaukee. Now, why the people in Texas would care one way or the other, or quite frankly, anybody, is a mystery until you then figure out that those judges are going to basically rewrite the map for elections in the state of Wisconsin, presumptively, to where they could strip the significant advantage that Republicans have given themselves over the last decade or two. Now, if you're willing to set aside the conceptual argument that there was cheating in the voting, how do you then equate that voter ID passed with a massive percentage? Meanwhile, the left of center judge also won with a massive percentage. How does that happen? I mean, there's a significant swing there, and you would not think there would be much overlap in those voters. But we're supposed to believe, we're expected to believe that that's what really happened. Color me dubious. Now, what's interesting is back home here in Texas, we had some people that were protesting over the weekend. I'm not entirely sure what they were protesting. It seems to me they were protesting government investigating government wasting money. And they're fearful that they're going to, quote, take away people's Social Security, which, by the way, might happen whether we want it to or not, because it's not really fully funded. But setting that aside, that Ponzi scheme was never designed to be permanent. But setting all that aside, so what you're really saying is you're wanting to make sure that you keep getting your dole payment. Okay. And I'm going to be generous. I'm a Gen X guy. I knew that from the get-go I was never going to see any of this so-called Social Security retirement fund. And the generation and multiple generations before me paid in quite a bit. So I imagine they're going to get their payout, right? And that's what it's all about, is paying off your voters to make sure they still come and vote for you. But what I don't figure out is, how is it that we've got foreign-born nationals cashing in on Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, whatever? How is it that we've got illegal aliens here getting in that money? Nobody's upset about that. Now, keep in mind, there's a whole lot of people in the squishy middle. We're not talking about far left center. We're not talking far right center. We're just talking the squishy middle that are very, very protective of their government benefits, right? Their handouts. And to a degree, I understand it, especially if that was your plan. I'm going to get money from government when I retire because they're taking lots of money from me now while I'm working. And it's my expectation that I'm going to get that paid back. That's a fair enough assumption. But if you expect to see that money, wouldn't you also expect that they're not going to give it to people that didn't really put into it? Right? Again, the conspiracy that's playing out in front of you is they have duped an entire couple of generations that they can get money from nothing, that they can get blood from the turnip, if you will. And here we are, 2025, and someone finally said, you know what? We spend an enormous amount of money that isn't ours, that we're borrowing. Let's look and see where it's going. Let's, investigate the situation. And as a result of that money being turned off, even if it's temporary, there's a lot of media corporations that suddenly don't have any money. There are a lot of things that are going on overseas that suddenly can't do what they're previously been doing. So my question is, why are we, the American public, funding those? And I'm willing to overlook all the NGO hustles, where family members of Congress and other well-placed federal officials just happen to run NGOs that just happen to get a ton of money from the federal government. That, by the way, is in fact our money, yours and mine. Just setting all that aside, not going into that because, quite frankly, there's a lot of crazy going on there. What does that mean? We see this playing out, and we're getting beat up for doing this. But it's not their money, right? This is part of the conspiracy, right? They duped a whole lot of people that if you give us your money now, you give it to us, you're going to get something back later. And while we have it, we're going to do all these sorts of things that are going to be for your best. Does anybody actually believe that anymore? So you show up, you go protest at a Social Security office. I don't even know that you can articulate what you're protesting. Okay, you don't like the fact that a billionaire is working for another billionaire who was the elected president and investigating where all this money is going that they've taken from us. And they're the bad guys. Now, I don't know, in perhaps a different world, the individuals that allowed this, the individuals that set this up, here's looking at you, Congress, former presidents, they would be the ones held accountable. Those would be the ones that were being protested. Those are the ones that might have a little fear in their lives. But instead, apparently, if you drive a Tesla, you're the bad guy. How does that work? Now, again, let's go back a step. Here in Texas, for something much closer to home, we, the Republican Party of Texas, have for multiple years put in our platform that, yeah, we want school choice, but we don't want any strings. We want school choice, but we want parents to, be able to keep the money that they're already having taken away from them to fund the government schools. We want school choice, but we want very clearly to be a delineation between what state controls or what state does and what the parents can do. Yet that's not what we're seeing put forth through the Senate or the Texas House. In fact, we're getting the very thing that we said we don't want in the first place. So while I can say simultaneously I support school choice, I can oppose those bills, right? So I have friends that are in the neighboring county, and they ask me right away, well, are you willing to oppose SB 3 or SB 2, whatever the number is now? I don't know, and I don't care. My answer is, well, they put strings on it, right? Yeah. Well, then, yes, of course I'm opposed to it. I mean, I knew from the get-go that's what we were going to get. And when I was at the state convention and they were arguing back and forth, well, no, of course we don't want strings. No, of course we're going to demand there's no strings. Yes, but you do understand that anytime government takes your money and gives it back to you or somebody else, they always put conditions on it. It's natural, right? They took your money and they're going to let you keep some of it or give you some of you back, but they're going to put conditions on that. We're not allowed to put conditions on what they take from us, but they give us conditions when they're going to let us keep it back or get it back, if you will. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of large multinational corporations coming in under the guise of doing education, and they get this money. I'm not a big fan of that. Likewise, I'm not a big fan of organizations that are run by the state that have government employees that also have a union that also dictate the policy and then fail to deliver for decades on end and then say that the problem is they didn't get enough money. I have a problem with that too. But these seem to be the only two choices that they're going to offer us. Now, if you want to homeschool, that's great. Please do so, but don't take that government money. Don't be foolish. Now, I got to tell you, I believe most homeschooling families are smarter than that, but they're also looking at this, well, if we can get a certain percentage of our money back, that might give us some financial freedom that we wouldn't otherwise have. Or, if you will, there's some families that might be able to benefit from putting their kids in a better school. Okay, that's true. And right now, the pilot program is apparently good for 100,000 people. It's a pilot program, basically, right? And they're going to do this straight. They're going to play it up straight, and they're going to sucker a whole lot of people in, and a whole lot of schools are going to take that bait. Oh, that sweet, sweet government money. You want to know why the government schools, why they're so bloated with administration? In order to keep getting that sweet, sweet government money, they have to comply. They have to fill out the paperwork. They have to meet all the rules and the requirements. Which is beneficial because, look, it's just more government employees that belong to the government association / unions. And, well, they're going to protect themselves first. Most of the arguments I heard about being anti-school choice were about the teachers' pensions. Okay, that's fair, I guess. You want to protect your retirement. I can respect that. Then they were worried about school districts having to make cuts. Okay, I get that too. But if the school district sucks, which some of them do, why wouldn't you want them to streamline the process? Why wouldn't you like them to get rid of some of that dead weight? Why wouldn't you want them to find a better way to do things? I'm just saying. But again, you say, Stephen, there's a conspiracy here. They want to take our money and give it to private corporations, and those private corporations are going to come in and do their job, and nobody's going to hold them accountable and this and that. Really? No, they're going to be held accountable. In fact, they're going to probably be involved in writing the rules so that they can stay accountable. But right now, the government schools that, quite frankly, run largely let's call it challenged. They got free reign over what they do. Now, I wish the state of Texas would rein in some of the crazy that goes on in these districts. Even though they have the title ISD, which is supposed to stand for Independent School District, but the money is all tied up in the state. I imagine they did that during Robin Hood or perhaps before. When you talk about a conspiracy, he who controls the money controls the music, right? He who pays the piper calls the tune. Isn't that what it is? So when you say you want more state in your government, whoa, talk about a Freudian slip there. Say you want more state in your schools, or government schools, if you will, consider, is that what you really want? Meanwhile, if you're a private school, or even a semi-private school, do you think you're going to benefit from more requirements, more hoops? Do you think your net outcome is going to be positive to get some of that sweet, sweet government money when you have to hire a bunch of people whose sole job it is to justify you getting that money? You're going to have to cater to students that you wouldn't otherwise take in. You have to, change your curriculum, change your rules. If you're a conservative Christian school and you take this government money, one of the two things is wrong. Either you're not conservative or you're really not a Christian. I'm not sure which it is. Far be it for me to judge you, but perhaps you ought to reconsider that. Because when you take government money, government's in charge. Oh, you can say you're still a good school and you still do this stuff, but you're taking their money. They're going to call the shots. It's inevitable. It will happen. So if you want to talk about that conspiracy that's close to home, that's brought to you by our governor. Now, I know people have talked about him being an internationalist and a globalist and all this other stuff. I would say there's probably some evidence to suggest that he is compromised. But on the surface, he's our governor. He's a good Republican. He wants what's best for the people of Texas. Maybe. He's just conservative enough that he doesn't get bounced. That's what it boils down to. And all things being considered, he's better than any Democrat. And I've talked about this before, right? Do you think it's any coincidence that both he and Dan Patrick got, 60 some odd % of the vote in the primary? Does anybody really believe that's true? We're supposed to believe it. They wouldn't lie. They wouldn't cheat, right? There's no conspiracy to see here. Nothing to see here, folks. Go to bed, good citizen. Again, I don't know. You don't know. Nobody can really truly know. I suspect that some of these people know, or they think they know, or they're the ones manipulating the machine so that they think they're in charge. For now. You see, whether or not you believe in the conspiracy or a conspiracy or multiple conspiracies, the fact of the matter is conspiracies have always existed. They always will exist. They take on different angles, different presentations, different leaders. Nothing that we see is 100% understood. It just doesn't happen that way. And when you consider that they're working together for a specific outcome, right? It matters what the outcome is. So keep in mind that we have a very general idea. Multiple people working together for a goal can constitute as conspiracy. If they're working together for something good, well, generally that would be seen as a good thing, right? If they're working against, or if they're working together to bring about something that we oppose, well, that's a bad thing. Who makes the decision? Who determines what's right and what's wrong? Well, we all do, individually. There should be, or there could be, or perhaps you don't believe, a defining text that delineates right from wrong. And if only we would follow that, we might have an idea. Now, I know there's a lot of agnostic or atheistic people out there that say that they don't need a book to have good morals. Okay. What's a moral? I mean, you have to have something that is a touchstone for what's right and what's wrong. And when you're dealing with a conspiracy, if the conspiracy, in my mind, is there to protect individual liberty, if the conspiracy is there looking to fight back against another conspiracy, well, yeah, okay, I get it. And to a degree, that's appropriate. Those that sought to toss the British Empire from the colonies were a conspiracy. Those that left the Union were a conspiracy. Those that sought to overthrow this dictator in history were part of a conspiracy. Most of us can at least suggestively agree that was a net positive. That was something that we would support. But it's still a conspiracy. They're working against the power at hand. So I would suggest to you, it's not just the conspiracy, but it's the outcome that is the issue. There are conspiracies all around us. Remember, 2 or more people working together for a specific end. It would be fair to say that I'm part of a conspiracy to elect certain people to certain offices. Right? I mean, draw to its logical conclusion. Does that make it bad? No, not necessarily. Using the previously mentioned example of the outcome in Wisconsin, there are a certain group of people that would have been mighty upset if billionaire out-of-stater affected an outcome that was different than what they got. But they seem to be perfectly content with the billionaire foreigner that affected the outcome they currently have. So is their problem the conspiracy or the outcome? That's really what we're talking about. So as I live in the state of Texas, right? The great state of Texas, the Lone Star State, and I have become a Texian by choice, I have to ask myself, is the current state government doing what's best for Texas? Is the current federal government helping or encouraging the state of Texas? Now, you may be able to answer yes to one or yes to both. But there are always underlying things going on in the background that we don't really know about that, quite frankly, constitute a conspiracy. So the real question is, is it the conspiracy that upsets you or the outcome? I don't like being manipulated by anybody. I imagine the vast majority of the people that I know don't like being manipulated. I suspect that we all accept from time to time that we are being manipulated, and as long as we kind of agree with what the outcome is, stated outcome is, of that manipulation, we tolerate it. So, what do you want to do about it? Because keep in mind, the only thing you can change is the thing that's most close to you, the most local thing. So you can make your choice, right? You can spend all your time fretting about some global conspiracy, or you can deal with the things going on right here, right now. Again, I'm not enthusiastic about the notion that foreigners, billionaires, are messing around trying to affect the outcome of my election in the state of Texas any more than I was that they were doing it in the state of Wisconsin. So, if there's a corresponding pushback, another, let's call it mirror conspiracy, I might, in fact, just be okay with that because it's working to my end. We'll see. We'll see. Keep in mind, it's often not the conspiracy in and of itself. It's the outcome that they're seeking to bring about. With that, this has been According to Callus. This has been episode 736. And remember, it's a conspiracy. Probably always. But just make sure we're going to get the outcome that we would prefer. The outcome that benefits we the people. The outcome that is best for Texas. And I will see you. That's right, on the other side.
Wanted. Young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.